Good morning, everybody. Wow, what a packed room. This is super exciting. So I'm going to start by introducing our illustrious speakers, and then I'm going to go on and give a little bit of an overview of some of the reforms that relate to the work that they do at 8:01 p.m. on election night. Gail Pellerin, as many of you know, let me just adjust this a little, is the County Clerk, Registrar of Voters for Santa Cruz County, California. Ms. Pellerin was appointed to the position in July 2004 after serving as the county's elections manager since 1993. She was elected to her fourth term in 2018. Woohoo! She's much beloved in Santa Cruz County, as many of you are aware. She has more than 33 years of experience in public service. Oh, I didn't mean to date you like that. 7 years working for the state legislature in Sacramento, which was news to me. At 26 years serving as a primary elections official in Santa Cruz County. Ms. Pellerin served as the president of the California Association of Clerks and Elections Officials from 2010 to 2012. She served on the Secretary of State's Voting Accessibility Advisory Committee since 2006, and she's been a member of the Future of California election since 2011, right? Since its inception, yeah. Rebecca Martinez, hi Rebecca, is the Madera County Clerk, Recorder, and Registrar of Voters, and she's a lifelong Madera County resident. Since 1990, Ms. Martinez has been elected to the position 8 times. Fantastic, right? These much beloved elections officials over here. From July of 2008 through July of 2010, she served as the president of the California Association of Clerks and Elections Officials. That's what happens when you get reelected so many times. You serve. And on the Statewide Association of County Clerks, clerks of the Board of Supervisors, and registrars of voters. In July of 2010, California Secretary of State Deborah Bowen presented Ms. Martinez with the National Association of Secretary of State's Medallion Award in recognition of her intelligent, open-minded, and enthusiastic dedication to making our democracy work better. Now, we did on this panel intend to have a voice of the community, a community organizer, someone yeah, that's the empty chair. Someone who would represent voters and give a sense as to how voters feel about all of this. That was Pablo Rodriguez. He is the founding executive director of Communities for New California Education Fund. He's unable to be here with us today, but you know what? We have so many voices of voters right here in the audience that I think we're going to be able to fill in with him just fine. Now, last but of course not least is John Myers. John joined the Los Angeles Times as Sacramento bureau chief in 2015. After more than 2 decades in radio and television news, much of that as an award-winning reporter covering State House policy and politics. During a decade of working for San Francisco's NPR affiliate, my NPR station, his unique online projects included everything from one of Sacramento's original politics blogs, interesting, to California's first politics podcast. He also served as the moderator of gubernatorial debates in 2014 and 2010, and I worked with him then at that point. An excellent moderator who asks really tough questions. Often cited by state and national news organizations as one of Sacramento's top journalists, he's a graduate of Duke University and the University of California, Berkeley. This is my clicker. All right. So, and part of this is last night when we heard that Pablo couldn't make it, I decided to expand my introduction a little bit, give a little overview of some of the new elections advances that Secretary of State Padilla covered. I'll cover them a little bit more. Over the past few years, California has passed a plethora of laws that are designed to increase participation. Most of you know about these. Our speakers today will be talking about how many of them, they'll walk us through them and talk about how they converge to impact that canvas that starts at 8:01 on election night, and maybe how they affect the days leading up to the canvas as well. First of all, we are among the first states to implement online voter registration. At this point, it's sort of like, we take it for granted. But that was a real revolution. And research shows that people who register online are much more likely to vote than other people who do not, that in states where online registration isn't available. So it's an important step forward. It's part of the puzzle. California motor voter, despite all the glitches, and I'm sure many of you have read John Meyer's most recent article outlining those glitches, and you'll probably have questions for him about that in our question period, and all sorts of startup problems. We have seen a surge of new registrations. As Secretary of State Padilla said, 1 million new registrations in this state came out since the DMV automated registration process was put into place. Statewide, right now, 79% of eligible Californians are registered to vote. That's the highest percentage since 1997, right? We've got same-day registration through Election Day. It's never too late to register in this state. That is an extraordinary advance. Right now, it's limited to elections offices and to designated locations, but there is a bill in the legislature, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of California, ACLU, and Common Cause, that would bring that same-day registration process to every polling location. Right? So there's always a next step. And so far, and the California Association of Clerks and Elections Officials is on this too. Their legislative committee has a line-busting committee that is specifically devoted to figuring out ways to make sure that Californians are able to take advantage of same-day registration and not be left behind because they have to travel long distances to one or possibly two locations in most counties. In Voters' Choice Act counties, of course, this is available in every vote center. So that's one huge advantage of the Voters' Choice Act counties. Policies like the new one requiring vote-by-mail return envelopes to be postage paid, as you see up there, woo, encourage vote-by-mail, right? They encourage all of these things to make voting more equitable and more accessible. And now we're up to over 65% of our voters statewide who are using mail ballots. So widespread voting by mail increases turnout, and turnout's what we want, right? But that also increases the burden on elections officials and the time that it takes to process those ballots. By the Friday morning after Election Day in 2018, there were still 3.7 vote-by-mail ballots to count, right? That's three days after Election Day. 3.7 million. We can take questions later. I'm not sure what that question was. Then we've got the Voters' Choice Act. I'm not going to go into this in detail. The next panel is all about it. But the goal is to make voting more flexible, more convenient, expand the time for voting beyond an anachronistic Tuesday, having weekend in-person voting available, build in elements to ensure that the needs of people with disabilities and limited English proficient voters are accounted for. And that's built into the legislation, really important factor. You're going to hear details in the next panel, but the basics are that every registered voter automatically receives a ballot in the mail. Neighborhood polling places closed down, which is a potential area of problem, right? Where we want to make sure that people are not disadvantaged by the fact that their neighborhood polling places are being closed down, and they are replaced by a fewer number of full-service vote centers that are accessible and that have some of that bilingual assistance that people need. And then, of course, you've got the three ways to vote. You can vote by mail, drop box, or at a vote center. And those vote centers open up early, anywhere ranging, depending on the county, from 29 days before the election. That at least one place is open 29 days before the elections office, up through more of those vote centers opening up the 11 days before the election, and then the 11 full days, 10 days before the election, and 4 full days, 3 days before the election, the number of vote centers increases. And as Secretary of State Padilla noted, VCA counties' turnout exceeded the statewide average, and comprise half of, and the ones coming on board comprise half of the state's electorate. So we also work to maximize the count here in California. When signatures on mail-in ballots don't match the ones on the record, or when there's no signature there, we don't toss out ballots like they may do in other states. Elections officials notified voters, and they give them no less than 8 days to fix the problem. Also, new legislation. Woohoo! And we maximize the count as well. Now, one of the things I was very concerned about with this increase in vote-by-mail voting is that some of those vote-by-mail ballots would not meet the mark in terms of the complexities of filling out that ballot envelope correctly, and we'd see an uptick in rejection of vote-by-mail ballots. That was a real concern. In other states, we see problems related to not counting all those vote-by-mail ballots, but we're doing things to make sure that more vote-by-mail ballots get counted. So we've got postmark +3. Ballots postmarked by Election Day are now counted if they arrive by the Friday after Election Day, if the Election Day is on a Tuesday. Voters can turn in their ballot anywhere in the state, and elections officials have to ship them to the right county. That takes time, right? In the 2016 election, Californians cast more than 1.3 million provisional ballots, far more than in any other state, right? But, and here's the key, we've also got a really high rate of counting them. Only 1.3% were rejected in 2016. So a key here is that we do not reject ballots that are cast in the wrong precinct, okay? Ohio voters had to go to court to get provisional ballots counted when they were cast in the right polling place, but the wrong precinct. That's the right church, wrong pew problem. It's crazy, right? That means a voter goes to the wrong table in a gym, votes with a provisional ballot, and they weren't being counted for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to get into, and they weren't counted. So we had that was something that was only corrected through court order. And still to this day in Ohio, if you cast one in the wrong polling location, you're in the wrong place, you should have been at one down the block somewhere, it's not going to be counted at all. We do not do that here in California. All right, so what does all this mean? Well, John, this is your article. This is I subscribe to more newspapers than you can ever imagine because I support journalism. I support print journalism. I pay for it all. Yep, it's just part of the monthly bill. So what is all of this? What's all this mean? It means that it takes a while to count all these ballots. So here's John's headline here. California's ballots won't all be counted next week, and that's completely normal. Whoops. And he goes on to explain it. He will explain more about that today. And then we've got Mother Jones. What's the response to all those delays, all the delays that we have in counting ballots because of all these new rules to make sure that votes get counted? Well, according to Mother Jones, the interminable, and I know that we're going to have some objections to the concept that we are actually having an interminable count, the interminable counting process is a sign that democracy is working, unlike in some other states. All right, good, support, people get it, the pundits get it, the media gets it, right? Sort of. Paul Ryan disagrees. Or others are saying that it's bizarre. On election night in 2018, The AP called California's 21st congressional district for Republican incumbent David Valadao. 3 weeks later, Democrat T.J. Cox declared victory with a 529 vote lead, 529. It's a pattern. It's a pattern that played out in districts across California where Democrats trailed by thousands of votes on election night, but flipped later. And it led House Speaker Paul Ryan to accuse California of ballot harvesting and loosey-goosey practices. So, having said that, I'm real interested in how our panelists, all of them experts in the field, feel about all of this, and their responses, their reactions, and their explanations as to what exactly is happening over the 30-day canvass period, whether that's really a long time, whether it's a reasonable amount of time, and how we are ensuring that ballots get counted in California. So let's see, let me just go back to that, and we'll get started. Oh, where's Gail's PowerPoint? How do I get to it? Should I just flip through back? Oh, cool.
And how do I make it go?
Here.
Oh, God. Okay. Am I first?
You are.
Okay.
You are.
Okay. Oh, I get a handheld? Okay. Okay, that's much better. Okay.
Oh, you want to just sit?
Huh? I don't care. Hi. Okay. Is it, there it is. Okay. All right. Is sitting okay? You're good with this? Okay. So, the photo, every night, every election night, we have cake. It gets us through the night. And there's always some cake left over, and we eat it the next day. We get desperate for chocolate. Yeah. We don't even refrigerate it. We just leave it out, and we just come in the morning and dig right in. Sometimes there's pizza, too. So it is a feeding frenzy on election day just to get us through it. So, and then I hit this. Okay. So here we have a 30-day canvass. 30 days is the right amount of time. In fact, sometimes I think we could use more time because we take every one of those 30 days. Our staff is working around the clock. We're working weekends. We're working split shifts, just getting through the volume of tasks that need to be done to ensure the integrity of the vote. So just an overview here is that we have the vote by mail processing. We do vote count updates. There was a time when we were one of those counties that did not do an update. We just said, it creates a lot of drama because I don't like to use the word flip, but things happen. When you add votes to a total, the total number of votes change. And sometimes the person who is winning is no longer winning. And so there's a lot of things that do happen when you add votes to a total. And so it does create a lot of drama, and we're responding to that pretty much daily. Audit. We do so much to audit the polls and everything else that we do. We do a manual tally to verify the machine count, and we've participated in risk limiting audits in a pilot project, and there's a risk limiting audit panel later today, and I think that's definitely a direction that we want to go. We need to tag voter records to make sure that they are giving credit for voting, and processing provisionals is another huge task that we do. And provisional voting seems to get a bad name, and I think that it's actually a very positive thing. It's that fail-safe tool that we have to allow a voter to cast their vote and count and make sure that that vote gets counted, and whether it's a partial count or a full count. And then again, back to auditing, we audit every item, every scrap of paper that comes back from the polls. What's that? Okay, so the vote by mail is like fine wine. It takes time. And we find that we end up with more ballots. On election night, we count a certain number of vote-by-mail ballots that are ready. These are for all those voters that got their ballot, voted it, turned it in at a drop box, or got it back to us. And we've been paying postage in Santa Cruz County for a number of years now. So it's real easy to return that ballot. But, how many of you hang on to that ballot till election day? And you wait, and then you turn it in. So we are now counting more ballots after Election Day than prior to Election Day. And we currently count by precinct in Santa Cruz County. And I need to say that Santa Cruz County is also a polling place county. We have not moved to vote centers yet. We hope to do that after 2020. Rebecca, my colleague here, is a vote center county, so you'll get a different perspective. But we count our vote by mail ballots by precinct. So we sort on the front end. And what that means is that we take more time to get the ballots in the right boxes by precinct. So if someone calls on a recount or does anything differently, or you're needing to audit, we can find those easily. So I got 5 minutes, so I'm going to hurry. So we sort by the return method. We got to compare the signature. We contact the voter if there's no signature or the signature does not compare. And we extract the ballot, and we have ballots that need to be duplicated. We count the ballots, and then we securely store them. Okay, next slide. Polling tabs. So we used to have an envelope that the signature was exposed, and people didn't like that, so we now have the signature covered. So a human being has to pull that tab 83,868 times. So you can see they're really happy doing that task. And I wanted to include a lot of pictures in this so you can see the faces that are behind this process, because it does take an army of people to make the canvas happen. And we key in the vote by mail ballots, and as you can see, there's more vote by mail to process after Election Day than prior to Election Day. Those are our storage areas where we sort by the polls, like whether they were turned in by the polls or turned in at a drop box or returned by mail. And this is our rainbow of ballots, we call them. So now that you can turn in a ballot anywhere in the state of California, we get ballots turned in from all over the state of California. Different counties use different colors of envelopes. Makes me think of rainbows because I like to look at things very positively. And so this is us getting those ready to FedEx out to the other partner counties in the state of California. And this one is the voter intent, inspecting the ballots. So every one of those ballots that we count, the 83,006, are hand looked at by human beings. So we have people extracting the ballot from the envelope. You can see our coworker there is very happy doing that task as well. She would hate me for including this photo, but that's her telling me quit taking my picture. And we're looking to see if there's any stray marks or mismarks or voters change their mind, and it has to go to a duplicating board to correct it so it counts according to how the voter wants it to count. Sometimes ballots come in that have been chewed by postal equipment. I actually tracked this voter down and was able to get their ballot cast correctly and got the other half. So, yay, Santa Cruz. Okay. And then ballot, we call this, it's a fun sport called ballot catching, because the ballots come out, is that the one that's up? The ballots come out through the vote counting machine rather quickly, and we've got people there catching them and putting them into boxes and securing them. On election night, we finished at 12:50 a.m. for that night, and it's always very confusing because counties put out 100% of precincts reported. What that means is all of our precincts have turned in. We know that they've all been accounted for. There's no stray inspector out there, at a bar with their ballots that hasn't turned them in yet. So we've got all the election precincts returned, but it's not 100% of the vote. It is just a snapshot of the votes. It's a good number of the votes that were cast at the polls, but the vote by mail and provisionals and conditional same-day registrations are still to be done. And then in November 2018, whatever year it was, our next update we did was on November 13th, Tuesday after the election, and then our final was done on December 4th at 5:54 p.m., 2 days early, I want to add. Okay. Yes, thank you, Dora. Okay, and then another thing we do is we do a random draw before we do our manual recount of the precincts. So randomly our selections of precincts to verify the machine count, and we do that poll audit to verify We verify all the voted ballots, all the provisional, unvoted, spoiled, rosters. I mean, we account for all the activity that occurred at all of our polling sites. And this process does take a long time. And then we start our manual tally. Now, I gotta say, oh wait, that's not it, no. So when you do the random draw of the precincts, if we don't catch every contest has to be recounted. So in some cases, and the manual count is a 1%, but I could have a contest that's just in 2 precincts. So if I recount 1 precinct, I'm actually counting 50%. So it's not always just 1%. And the manual recount is to verify the machine count, and these are photos here of people doing that task, and then our ballots just lined up in the hallway there. And that spreadsheet is part of our ultimate goal here is to end up with this lovely statement of vote that includes all the reporting and accounting for all these activities. And then we have the Dominion voting system with a touch screen, and we have the voter verified paper audit trail. We manually recount that as well. We do 10% of the precincts on that one. And in order to make this system work, we use paint rollers. So that's kind of is that the right one that's up there? Yeah. So we have 2 paint rollers, and we put the VeriVote printer tape on there, and we roll that through to count, to manually recount those votes. And it's a team of people that do that. We got 1 person observing, 1 person reading, and 2 people recording. So again, it's an army. And then we have provisionals, and it's a sea of pink. And I try to encourage our workers, our help, to dress in pink, so we see pink whenever we close our eyes at night. It says stop, just a minute. Okay, there's only 3 of us, so we got a little more time. Okay, and then we have, I make up the rules as I go. I took that time. Okay, so I'll just hurry through.
I'm quoting you on you saying you make up the rules.
Okay. You know I do. Okay, all right, quick, okay.
I meant to say.
Okay.
Off the record, John, this whole thing.
Okay, all right, so again, audit everything, and of course it's a mess, and then we do search for live ballots, and we do find them stuck. I mean, poll workers put things in weird places. We do a seal audit, equipment incident report, and then we final count. Is that my final count? Store, secure, and it's a wrap, more cake.
Good morning. I knew Gail would go into a lot of detail, so I'm not going to bore you with all of it.
I was not bored.
What? No. I didn't get to finish. I didn't want to bore you with it again. All right. So in late 2017, I opted to become one of the 5 counties that went to the Voters' Choice Act model, and we did that commencing in June of 2018. The act primarily, as you've heard, required that a vote-by-mail ballot be mailed to each and every registered voter. And it also required the establishment of vote centers, full-service vote centers that replaced polling places. Now, I don't know if most of you know where Madera County is, but it's located between Merced and Fresno, and we're off the Highway 99. So if you're driving on the I-5, you will not find me. We have approximately 58,000 registered voters, 3 people that work in elections that have less than 2 years experience. 2018 was fun. And we have 1 election manager. I mention this because changing the voting model for Madera County was huge. It was a huge undertaking with such a small staff, very limited funds, and an antiquated voting system that I purchased in 1990. I went with a group of registrars to the Capitol one day, and we were there to lobby the legislators to help us in getting money to replace voting systems or to purchase new voting systems. And I knocked on one door, and the aide came out, and he said, "What can I help you with?" And I said, "Well, we're trying to get support. We're trying to get funding for voting systems in California." I said, "Look, I purchased my voting system in 1990, and he goes, "Whoa, that is old. I was born in 91.
I know who that is.
Right? Actually, they're all working for me. So in addition to changing the county's voting model, I had to purchase a new voting system, which I did, and was used for the first time in June of 2018. And like Gail, I use the Dominion voting system, and my voters absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. It's tablet-based, and most people have a tablet at home in some size or shape of another, and so it was well received, more so than I thought would be. For a county our size, we opened 6 vote centers. 2 of those vote centers were open 10 days before Election Day, and 4 were open 3 days before Election Day. In addition, we opened 2 exterior drop boxes that were open 24/7, and then we opened 2 interior boxes that were open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and those were located inside grocery stores. 5 minutes. Okay, I have 5 minutes. I got to speed it up. We did have electronic check-in at each vote center, so basically every single voter could go to any vote center to vote and receive the ballot that was tailored to their area. So that was huge. So it lessened our provisional ballots. So because we tabulate at central count, there's no counting going on at any vote center. Every night, those vote centers would bring in live ballots, vote-by-mail ballots that were dropped off at the location, provisionals, and of course CVR and/or conditional voter registration. And of course, any of the vote-by-mail ballots that were picked up at the drop boxes. The next morning, staff would process those ballots and get them ready for tabulation on election night. And a lot goes into that, Gail told you. Staff did an excellent job of keeping up with that work daily. And because they did, I was looking at life through rose-colored glasses. I really thought that I would be done with my canvas earlier, right? Because we were getting some of the work done every day as opposed to after one day. Well, it didn't quite work that way. We have to keep in mind that the canvas is dictated by many, many things. And some of it are new laws that we welcomed, but it does take time. You have to wait for things to come in the mail, and so it does extend your time for processing a bit. But voter behavior is huge. The earlier that voters submit their vote-by-mail ballot, the less time would be spent processing those at canvas time. Now that also includes ballots that we receive up to 3 days after Election Day. But this is a good thing. It allows for counting of more ballots before, it allows for the counting of more ballots. Before the law changed, ballots received by mail after Election Day were not counted. And so for June of 2018, we counted an additional 1,266 vote-by-mails that came in within that 3-day period. And for November, it went to 1,128, so it was a little bit less. I think more people used the drop box. The length of the canvas is also dictated by necessary post-election activities, including the 1% manual audit. Why am I echoing?
You're okay out there.
Okay, good. It takes 4 people to tally one ballot. That's huge. I got 2 minutes left. Reconciling vote center activity is huge, and accounting for the ballots that were issued. Also, the law allows for a voter to cure anything that's wrong with their signature. We love it. But that takes time, and we have to accept those cures up to 2 days before certification. In 2018, we saw over 90% of our voters utilize the vote by mail. That was the highest amount ever, at least for us. 90. This means that a significant portion of those vote by mail voters probably voted by mail for the very first time. Approximately 30% were not your traditional vote-by-mail voters. If some of those voters were used to voting, say for example, on Election Day, I think that could account for the fact that we had received so many later, right? Because they were used to voting on Election Day. And so it was normal to them to get that back to us much, much later. And perhaps as voters adapt to Election Day being more than on one day, and adapt to voting by mail, we might start getting them a little earlier. All that being said, vote by mail ballot processing is very, very time consuming. And it's a lot of work to verify signatures on every single one of those ballots. I had a woman call one day and she said, "I'm calling because you caught me." And I said, "I caught you? I like it." How? She said, "You sent me a form because my son's signature didn't match. I signed it for him because he went back to school. And you caught me. Thank you." So what we do works. That's why those safeguards are in place. You've got a lot of people out there that truly believe that we don't check all those signatures. Stop. They're telling me to stop. But once we check all those signatures, we've got to get all those ballots ready to go into tabulation. And that's a lot of work. There's a lot of sorting. There's slitting of envelopes. That doesn't sound like much. It takes a long time to do that. And now we have a larger ballot than we used to, and so we have to find a way to flatten those ballots out. And I refuse to use an iron, Scott Konopasek. I hardly use it at home. Now, historically, Madera counties finished their canvass within 12 to 15 days, and that didn't change, which I found interesting. But here's the interesting thing. It takes us months and months and months to plan for an election. It's like that wedding, right? And you hope that when that day comes, that everything that you did, that you planned for, wasn't for naught. You hope that it turns out perfectly that day, or darn near. And then it comes, and the hype is over when election night passes. And so everybody's ready to move on, and you've got people hounding you for results. But the day is just beginning for us. We have a lot of work ahead of us. All those audits, it's all in our effort to ensure that we've done everything correctly and that everything we did will stand up to that smell test. And we know that everyone is anxious. We know that. I mean, we're not, dragging our feet because, hey, I'm not going to give it to Bob because, what was your name again? No. It's just a lot of work. At the end of the day, the canvass is going to take as long as it takes within the time permitted by law. Now, I can do it fast or I can do it right. It isn't a process that we want to rush with. I don't think you want us to rush. I don't think so. I've been charged with preserving the integrity of the vote and ensuring that every vote is counted and counted as cast. Thank you.
This is a fun crowd. Could we do this at cocktail hour next time? I got some awesome.
You didn't get the champagne?
I got the cocktail jokes. No, I missed the champagne. Damn. Thanks for letting me be here. I mean, these folks do it professionally. I watch them. So that's kind of the job of a journalist. I'm going to be pretty brief in what I'm going to say because I'd rather hear questions, comments, discussion. But because I'm part of that evil news media that demands information from all of you all the time, I'm going to focus on that for a moment because I'm going to be a bit of a skunk at the party in a way, and I'm going to tell you that I think that we need the information in a more We don't necessarily need it faster, but we need a more uniform system of getting information out after Election Day. And I think that's what I would tell you. I think the state needs to focus on that. I think it's a transparency issue. And I will tell you, but more than that, the traditional way of disclosing the count after Election Day doesn't work in the viral media world we live in. Now, you may not like that. And, well, some of you may like that. But, like, that's the universe we live in. It has exacerbated the pressure on the news media. It's exacerbated the pressure on candidates. Everybody uses it to their advantage. Every campaign spins the results and what you haven't done and what's happening and what's not going to happen. I'd like to see the state have a more uniform system of doing it. I'd like to write those stories. I will tell you that I think one of the greatest pieces, because thanks to Dora for putting up the piece that I wrote, because I felt compelled to continue to write these stories, you know, back to my East Coast media friends who would say California has this massive problem because it can't count its votes. I'm like, no, we can count the votes, dude. It just takes a while. But in doing that, I'd say one of the biggest pieces of misinformation is that uncounted ballot list that the Secretary of State's office puts out. And it's not their fault, so they're probably here and throw something at me. It's not their fault. It's that the data that comes in from 58 counties is all dependent on 58 counties. I mean, I know this. You run 58 elections. You don't run one statewide election. But your colleagues in other counties, God love them all, who don't put new reports out or don't put new uncounted numbers out, or we see a number that is hasn't been updated for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. Well, then the misinformation starts. Then the East Coast universe says, well, there's still 2.5 million uncounted ballots. There may not be 2.5 million uncounted ballots. You see my point? It's an information problem, I think, in a lot of ways. It's not to say that you can count them any faster. And I think that in a lot of small counties, you don't have the resources probably to give me more information, and so you need those from the state. I mean, the story that all of you, it's like the applause line. It's like I'm not saying what I'm about to say to get applause, but all of you do a lot with not the funding you need from the state government. Okay, sorry. But the unfunded election mandates in the state are an ongoing story, I think, for reporters like me, that the legislature gives you more mandates, tells you to count more ballots, tells you to count them longer, tells you to do this, tells you to do that, doesn't give you the money to do it. You know, I think it's the untold story of the Voters' Choice Act, is that it's a great idea, but it wasn't mandated statewide. Why was it mandated statewide? Because then they'd have to help you pay for it in some kind of way. And so I think that ongoing, it's the topic we should talk more about. All of you know who work in elections that you're already under the gun for an early presidential primary, the March primary, which we are less than 10 months away from. There's going to be a lot of attention paid to what you do. It's a presidential primary. We've got a lot of presidential candidates. We think a lot of them are going to possibly come to California. They're going to look for those votes. Some campaigns want to bank those early absentee votes and get them in and say they've got momentum before Iowa, New Hampshire. We're desperate to keep up with Iowa, New Hampshire. We have a complex about our personality in California, I suppose, where we have to vote earlier. We're needy, right? But a lot of the things we saw in 2016, I'm going to be really curious to watch. I'm going to be curious with things that have changed. More voters' choice counties. How is that going to work? The confusion over no party preference voters who said, I want to vote in the Democratic primary, and what do you mean I can't vote on it when I show up on Election Day, and I haven't done that? There's a bill in the legislature to ostensibly help with that. You know what that bill is? That says you have to send out more notices and more contact with your voters to tell them how to do it. Surprise, it doesn't come with any money for you to do that. Well, I haven't gotten to that. Conditional voter registration, the expansion of that, of same-day registration, that's good, but that also comes at a challenge where voters are going to have to know what to do. The fear of provisional ballots. There's a lot that you have to do, and there's a lot that we watch, and I'm just fascinated to see the intersection of these efforts to expand access to voting and expand the pool of people who actually do cast ballots with the mechanics of running an election. And elections that are paper-based and paper-based ballots for lots of reasons, lots of important reasons, it's challenging. And I think it's challenging for you to do the work. It's challenging for the press that covers elections to explain that to the voters. And then it's challenging, I think, moving forward for what people expect out of their elections. They certainly expect accurate elections. They expect secure elections. And I've had a little experience writing this week about the motor voter system and things that were difficult in rolling out that automated system. But there's a lot that comes out of Sacramento that comes down to you. You're the ones that run the elections. And I think that is a particular challenge. And we all want to see We all want to see people vote, but how you get that done and processed in time and how we explain it to people. And that's why I come back to my first topic, which is this list of uncounted ballots and how you do that. The more transparent you can be, the better. And again, I appreciate, like Madera County, you don't have a lot of people there. You don't have time to stop while you're actually counting ballots. Gail's cutting pieces of cake. Things are going on. But the more uniformity about what people can expect, when they can expect a new tally, how many ballots have been cast, how many are outstanding to be counted. I give great credit and a shout out to one county in particular, and not everybody can do this, but Orange County, Neil Kelly in Orange County. They have that little ticker on their website that says how many more hours, how many more minutes until the next update. And I'm that guy hitting refresh, like, come on, baby, give me the new ones in that congressional district. But it does give me some transparency as to when I will get an update on what the tally is. And I think there needs to be some discussion across California for that. You've done a lot of things to update your election processes, but the world is watching in a way it did not watch before. We don't write one story for the newspaper that publishes in the morning. We're writing online. We are constantly monitoring, and people want to know. And as I said at the beginning, the campaigns will use that to their advantage. If they think that they are actually closer than they are or farther behind than they are, or declaring victory. That's my favorite, when a candidate declares a victory. And then it's not really your favorite, and then they're wrong. But I do think we have to find a statewide conversation on that transparency and that information. So I'll stop there.
Gail has a rebuttal.
Excellent.
Oh, no,
Excellent.
No, just the uncounted ballot report. The issue that we have is that these ballots are coming in from everywhere, the mail, the drop boxes. I have a closet full of trays full of ballots. I have no way of, unless I'm going to stop and hand count them. It's a guess. And the issue is that sometimes we overguess, sometimes we underguess. You know, I mean, and I usually take a picture of it and post that and say, this is what we have. It's like, having a jar of jelly beans and guessing how many jelly beans are in the jar. I've got a closet full of jelly beans, and it's very difficult to come up with that magic number, and especially as things continue to come in through the mail, through other counties. So it's an estimate, and that's the ugly piece of it, is that it's just an estimate.
What would you need to get a better estimate? Sorry, can I play like reporter here for a moment? What would you need?
I would need people counting those as they came in. I would need a facility, number one, where I could, I have no room as well. So, I mean, we're working in very closed quarters. And I would need a special room that's secure, that I would have a team of people counting those trays as they come in. And it would, I'm not just talking 5 people, I'm talking probably 40 people or more for my county. And a room that's about half the size, maybe a third of the size of this room here, that I could then secure and store them overnight, and that doesn't even exist, and it's got to be in our building, because I don't want to transport them from one building to another building. That gets messy. So why don't you come over election night?
No, I just, no, the reason I asked the question in addition
I
to
have
the...
cake.
Okay. No, can I just say really quickly, the reason I asked the question in part is because I'm actually, I think I'm doing some reporting here on the stage, because I think that's the conversation that someone should have. That's a conversation that elected officials, that's a conversation that we in the press could write. Like we could try to clarify for people what that number is and what it would take to get a better number, and then let the public decide what they support, whether they support the mechanics in some way, shape, or form of getting a better number, because back to my original point, the number that we have now is used and manipulated and misunderstood and twisted and turned. And so you got to go one way or the other. You're going to either say, I refuse to tell you until the 30 days is over. Good luck with that.
That's what I used to do.
Well, yeah, good luck with that. I mean, I don't think that works. Or we've got to find some way to get some clarity to people. I certainly appreciate the challenges. I'll stop.
This is great. Do you want to?
Well, and I agree with Gail, but the other component is, yes, we can get a lot of people and throw them at whatever job you want them to do, but it all comes down to money. And all the money that we've received thus far, the reimbursements that we get, don't provide for paying additional staff. And so that is a missing component. And voters' choice needs more people. Not just more counties, but more people to work in our offices or at vote centers.
And when you do put people on a task, especially counting, and they're counting at 11 p.m. through like 4 a.m., those aren't great hours for brain work, and mistakes occur, so the accuracy of that may not be so great.
So I'd like to lift this out of the sort of the tactical for a moment and look more broadly at the question, because we all understand that there's reasons for the 30-day wait period, right? There's reasons to ensure all votes are counted, to do it right. There may be room for more transparency around when can we expect the next update, right? So that voters have a sense that they understand what's going on. It's not so opaque, right? But what is the mischief that insinuates itself when there is a long wait? Why does it matter? Is it just a matter of messaging to voters and getting the word out and having people understand that it takes time to do it the right way? Or is there something happening out there in the political sphere, within campaigns, among candidates, that really causes damage to the public's confidence in elections when we wait this long to count ballots?
Well, my 30-second answer is, of course there's other things going on out there. I mean, and I...
What is that mischief?
Well, no, but there's mischief by a president of the United States who asserts that there's massive voter fraud in California with absolutely no proof. There's mischief by campaigns, and that's not partisan. That's just, I've written the story. There's no proof of that. I'm looking for it. I can tell in my email if somebody's got all the ballots somewhere. But there are campaigns that do it, but I hate to pivot, but I'm pivoting. But I think the mischief is fueled by the opacity. The mischief is fueled when there's not a counter-narrative of transparency in some way. And I certainly understand the difficulties of the transparency. And I am not advocating for any particular version. I'm just telling you that when no one can refute the mischief with something specifically clear and concrete, the mischief grows, would be my observation.
Okay. Oh, well, there's so many questions. Okay, I'm going to turn. Have these all been looked at, Astrid, and put in any kind of an order, or?
I kind of group them by topics.
Okay.
So,
There are a lot.
This is the
How many?
cocktail hour.
Now, how long do we have for these questions? Okay, great. Then I will just.
two more.
Oh, two. Okay. Sorry, I'm taking a moment here because I want to see which ones. In the past, okay. In the past, I've told reporters I can stop processing and tell you how many ballots are left to count, or I can keep processing and count the ballots that are left. That was from Kathy Darling Allen, who's Registrar of Voters in Shasta
right.
County.
She's right. I get it.
Okay. For the registrars, did you face an unusual increase in provisional ballots in November of 2018? Or was it pretty much the same?
Well, in our county, it was, I think it was like 6,500 provisionals. It was about the same. It was actually probably even a little bit lower. With same-day voter registration, it was great. And we had our main office and 2 satellite offices for same-day voter registration, so that helped immensely with the number of provisional voting.
So the number of our provisionals decreased dramatically. We only had about 18, and the majority of those provisionals were people who happened to be in Madera. They found it, and were there and not in their home county. So they were maybe in our mountain area from Los Angeles, and they just wanted to vote. I said, well, all I can give you is a provisional. And they said, okay. And so anyway, it just isn't going to count until we have the law that says we can forward those, I suppose.
There's a question here. Can we use different language other than 100% of precincts reported, something that reflects the reality that all ballots are in the building but not counted.
I think that backs, I'm not the expert, but that goes back to my information
Yeah.
gap in the world right now, because that also is where, Dora, to your point, that's where the mischief people start to operate in then. We're like, well, all the 100%'s reporting, how can they not have it? They must have them in a drawer somewhere. And off we go to the races. So you should.
Yeah, I think it might, I might be wrong on this, but I think it's part of the program, and to take it out would be a change in the voting system, because it's all approved and certified with that format. And so we always put an explanation at the top that we can manipulate and say, this number means that all the precincts are in and there's still tens of thousands of ballots left to count.
Okay, all right. Why should elections officials cater to the needs or demands of the media? Why doesn't the media change the narrative to educate the public about the process?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And I'm going to be as frank with you as the question was with me. Because there is no monolithic media. Because there is no meeting where we sit down and go, aha, we're going to control the narrative. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. I mean, I work at the Los Angeles Times. We're the largest news organization in the state. I've written that story 4 times about why does it take so long to count ballots, and you still get all the questions. I don't control that. Boy, I would love to, because the subscriptions would come in then. But because I just frankly think that we are living in an era where information has been democratized to the level where there is no way to organize it in that way. And so I pledge to you, I mean, as a reporter, I'll do my best to try to educate people. But I can't force them to change that narrative, and I can't control the campaigns, and I can't control the local reporters who, again, not all reporters are great, who will harass you about it, for their 11 o'clock deadline. So it's a really good question. It's just that we are in an era where everything is so dispersed, it's really, really hard to bring it down for critical mass.
And when I do get questions like that, I ask people to come into the office and give them a tour and show them around. And if they're available, I have them volunteer and work and actually do the work so they can see for themselves. So, just educating and making it as transparent as possible.
That's good.
So, I think, and we have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to pose this to each of you as a sort of wrap-up. It seems to me that some of the concerns that you're hearing are really about disaffection, people not trusting the government, right? So I'd like to know, what do each of you think, and you can pull it outside of just the context of administration of elections specifically if you want to, but what do each of you think is one thing that we could do to restore public faith in elections so that the anxiety about waiting 30 days is not so intense?
I'll go back to my come see what we do firsthand and do it yourself. We're always recruiting volunteers. We have observers. We want people to come and observe everything we do. And we're trying to do more on social media and with technology to make that clear so people can see on their, on their phones. At least we have like a written description of what we're doing. I'd love to add video and cameras and stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's difficult because I go out. Well, when we decided to become a Voters' Choice Act county, my assistant and I went out prior to the June election, and we were out every night. I don't know what his wife thought about that, but we were out every single night. We gave over 50 presentations out there, and the more you try and control that narrative, the more opposition you have, because they've gone to some meeting and they've heard something negative and they've bought into it, and sometimes aren't necessarily interested in hearing the truth. Right now, I think at least 1 or 2 of the VCA counties have experienced a group out there who is sending out materials telling people, do not vote that ballot that you get in the mail. And so what's happening is these people are coming in with their ballots, the one we mailed them, and it's not voted because they were told, or they heard on the radio, or they heard from their next door neighbor that they can't trust that. And then they get to the vote center and we go, okay, look, you can either vote that one or I'm going to give you the exact same one. It's not different. And so it's a difficult question to answer, unfortunately.
John?
I don't know. Yeah, thank you, everybody. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to repeat what I said about transparency, but I'm going to try a different version of it. I think while I understand the rules, and as a state house reporter, as a state government reporter for 20 years, there are so many different iterations I have written of stories about the balance between state and local control over everything in California, state government, local government, housing, and other issues, education issues, right? Elections is another one, state versus local control. I respect the role of local governments, but I think in the absence of a broader statewide control of the process and funding, I already said that, or you look for the applause line, I think the varieties of election processes, the variety of election information is challenging, and I think it makes it more difficult for people to understand the election process. And ultimately what you want is you want informed, educated voters in an electorate, and part of that is they hear different messaging from different people through life, and then they hear it if they work in one county and they live in another county, or they get, and so I think that is a real hindrance in a state of 40 million people and 20 million voters. I think someone needs to take a more holistic look at how you are running those kinds of elections, because I think that, last thing I'll say is, while all of the people who are here work very hard to do those elections, this election system to me was somewhat created for a smaller California for a different era. And there needs to be some kind of rethinking of that. I don't know who does it. I don't want to appoint a blue ribbon commission. I don't want to cover the blue ribbon commission's meetings. Hell with that. I'm not doing any of that. But I am struck by that disconnect. When I talk to my friends and my neighbors and they don't understand some of those things, to me, we can do that some in the press, but elected officials and governments and advocacy groups have to come together to find something. And then, of course, you're going to fight the status quo, and the status quo likes the system as it is. Political parties like the system as it is, and interest groups sometimes like the system as it is. But I think that lack of clarity from Eureka to Calexico, I think, is a challenge for this state, especially if we think we are looking at statewide elections. Again, I respect local communities, but I am fascinated by how I have to learn so many different things when I talk to Gail or I talk to anybody else. It's very, very challenging.
All right. All right, and we're at stop. Thank you very much for our illustrious panelists. Amazing job. Thank you.